Hello, everybody, and welcome to WMMA Mania. I am your host, Drake Riggs, here. MMA Mania. Great to see everybody. If you're tuning in for the first time, or you've been here before, even though this is a new show, it is just kind of a reincarnation of sorts of everybody's favorite news preview and recap show of everything going on in the world of MMA involving the women, and just a general Q&A. So that is just kind of what we're going to be doing around these parts every Monday for about an hour at 12 o'clock p.m. Pacific time. Love the company. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, always happy to address them over the course of that hour. So today, we have two events to talk about from the past weekend, Ufc Vegas 48 and Bellator 274. A little bit of news, not a lot, as we get ready for Bellator 275 and Vegas 49 in the UFC this coming week. So, very exciting stuff. Great to be back. Great to get the show rolling again. It was nice to have a little break, I will tell you that much, and doing some different angles here, as you can see. Got a little bit of background music just for the intro. We're trying to be as fancy as we can. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Let's see what is going on in the comments. Jimmy is here. The Team Magna boys are back. There we go. Rain right out the gate, says Drake Jed Mishu. Oh, goodness. Starting the wars early. Shout out to Jed, though. Very fantastic Andrei Arlovsky piece today that he did. So check that out on MMA Fighting if you haven't yet. It's a good one. James says, sup, good to see you. Scott, Alvin, good to see you as well. Jin says, Team Magnum. Centro, what is up, man? Good to see all you guys again. Bruce says, good to see you. Yes, you as well. Rain says, is Ghost and Dre going to roast Jesse Jess for clinching a judoka? My goodness. Well, there's our good kickoff point, huh? Since we're going to be starting with the UFC Vegas 48 recap, which begins with the bantamweight fight that did see Stephanie Egger defeat Jessica Rose Clark via first round submission and armbar at, what is that right there? 3 minutes and 44 seconds into the first round. Let me pull up the imagery here, as we like to do. Where did it go? Right there. Yeah, so this was definitely not how I expected the fight to go. Nothing against Stephanie Egger. I was actually trying to argue that she was, because when she came into the UFC, a lot of people did not really know who she was, and understandably so. Had fought Invicta a couple times, had the fight or two in Ryzen. I don't remember if she had two. I know she fought there once against King Reina, I believe, and then ended up coming to the UFC, judo black belt, talented, and had fought at 145 before, but then seeing how she did against Tracy Cortez made me kind of think, oh, well, I don't know. Felt like she got exposed a little bit. Yes, came back in her fight after that, got a win, but then Jessie Jess, who's continually worked on her wrestling, that would have been able to be fine in that area if it went there. And she did all right at first, got the hip toss on her before the final one, but then got right back up. But I did not expect her to try and just initiate the grappling right away. So that ultimately cost her. She was talking about maybe trying to strike a little bit. And of course, that could have just been stuff to put out there and make people think, not give away your game plan necessarily, but yeah, didn't really see any striking whatsoever in this fight. And here we are, ends in the first finish loss of Jessie's career. So a bummer for her, no doubt about it, but a very good win for Stephanie Egger, who gets some momentum of her own now and takes away Jessie Jesses. So yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say about it aside from just questionable, straightforward approach, I guess, from Jessie. But hey, she'll be back, no doubt about that. And interested to see what is next for Stephanie Egger. If she can avoid, I guess, she got kind of woman handled a little bit by Tracy Cortez in that fight. So I was really surprised to see her right those wrongs, I guess, in this one. So, yes. Ghost says no rain. Jesse Jess has cool strikes in the clinch. So no, great performance for Egger. Indeed, it was. He says takedowns with overhook control are very nice. So props to Egger. And arm bars are from top are what judoka specialize in. That is absolute fact. As James says, of course, Ghost frickin' knows everything. He just does, doesn't he? Alvin, that was phenomenal. Love the submission since Ms. Clark didn't get hurt. Wishing Jesse Jess the best in the future, as well as Miss Egger. Well, I mean, hopefully not. Haven't really heard anything from Jesse since the loss, but you know, that bend was definitely a little bit. She tapped at a decent time, so I hope and think she didn't get hurt, but you never know. It just takes any quick moment to cause some damage, right? Oh, as Jimmy says, that was impressive. Didn't even know that Egger lost to Tracy Cortez. Yeah, that was her UFC debut on short notice. So I guess you could play that into a factor, but that was, you know, a flyweight beating a featherweight essentially. So that was just kind of something I always looked at. And I don't know why this is blocking off the bottom comments for me, but so just as I speak for the chat when I ask, when are you interviewing Ramona? I know you guys have been dying for the Ramona interview, and I definitely I was wanting to try and talk to her today or something before the fight, which we will talk about obviously for that preview. But you know, fight week and her first UFC fight, all that. Don't want to bother her too much, but perhaps after. Don't worry, the Ramona chat will come soon enough. As James says, I didn't really enjoy this card. Sorry, Drake. Don't be sorry to me. Be sorry to the fighters in the UFC. Fair enough. I thought it was an all right card. I thought it was all right. Yeah, I enjoyed it. There were some fights, of course, that weren't too great, but Chaz Skelly getting a nice win in his potential retirement. Love me some Chaz Skelly, just an awkward bodied man doing his thing out there. And then plenty of other shenanigans, of course. So, and Jimmy says, did you think that Walker was joking when he fell backwards? I mean, no, but I did see Kaposa tweeted that, and I thought it was hilarious. Yeah, he fell just so awkwardly. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've seen enough Johnny Walker silliness to not think that was what that was, but it was definitely odd. It was definitely very odd. As Mike Brooker says, those uniforms are oppressive. The old uniforms were far better. I'm assuming you mean the Venom ones, and I guess I don't really have a thought on that. But Scott says Hill is legit. Agreed. Jen says Drake and Ghost, who are your favorite unknown fighters right now in the UFC and why? Unknown. That's a good question, Jen. Unknown fighters. I mean, even though she lost in her debut, I still really like Liang Nan. I think she has good potential. I don't know. That's an interesting question too, because it's like defining unknown, Jin. I'll have to come back to that one, but I don't know. Liang Na sprung to mind there. So as we continue on with a much closer fight than that first one, as Gloria de Paula gets her first UFC win by defeating Diana Balbita. Unanimous decision, 29-28 across the board. Very curious to know how we feel about this one, you guys, because I personally scored this fight, I think it was 29, definitely not 30-27, 29-28 for Balbita, the first and third rounds. But as you can see by the numbers, very, very close statistically. Balbita overall outstriking her by 11. Round by round, she didn't get outstruck. As you can see, 35-32 in the first, 47-39, 42-42. Speaking of clinch work and clinch striking that Ghost mentioned earlier, I mean, what was it, that second round? I mean, even in the third a little bit, knees after knees. These ladies were just throwing knees in the clinch up against the cage all over the place, which was kind of fun. But yeah, this fight was interesting because their volume and output was very similar, But when it comes to that first round, I think the first and second were fairly clear for each. So DePaula, the second round, 10-9, and 10-9, obviously, in the other two as well for whoever. But Balbita, I feel like in the first round, just more immediate impact with her shots. And then in the third round, that was a very, very close one. Very, very close round. As you can see, obviously the strikes were identical, at least in terms of who landed more. And I guess in terms of who actually threw more, it was Balbita by a decent amount, 295 to 201 overall. Didn't really realize that. DePaula with the one takedown in the third. It was close. It was close. Not a robbery by any stretch of the imagination, but yeah. Go says hook to the body to low kick, and he hooks off the body jab. He's talking about Austin Hubbard as his favorite unknown fighter who hooks off the jab and hook to the inside low kick. James had it for DePaula. Jimmy also for DePaula, just the impact and effectiveness at range. All right, understandable. Cintra says, I kind of thought this fight was dull. It wasn't. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I can understand maybe those periods of, up against the cage not being too exciting, just the knee trading. But I don't know. There were a lot of intricacies to this one, and there was a high percentage of strikes being thrown. Like I said, I mean, over 400 combined. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed this intro, but I get it. You guys are all very particular now. Craig Johnston, good to see you. Been listening and wanted to say good to see you again. Good to see you as well, sir. Always love the show. Can't stay long though. Fair enough. Well, it'll be here on replay afterwards, so no worries. And Jen had it for Balbita. All right, there you go. Rue says I had it for DePaula. What do you think, Ghost? He wants to know. Yeah, and obviously Balbita believes she won. Has been a little bit vocal about it since, but she'll be back. Still very young, as is Gloria. And on to the next for each of them. Strawweight continues to be rather deep. So, all right. That was UFC Vegas 48. Only 2 fights for the ladies. All ladies on that one. And as mentioned, it was definitely not the strongest card on paper going in, as there have been a lot of changes to these cards this week and the next week, and just a lot of shuffling going on early here in the year. But I don't know. I don't have too many complaints. As on the other side of things, we did have Bellator 274, and I know the usual crew here just loves themselves some Bellator, but not a lot to talk about with this one either. But surprised me a bit as Deanna Bennett gets a clean sweep shutout here against Justine Kish, who was making her Bellator debut. Bennett gets the win, 30-27s, 2 30-27s, 1 30-26, which means a 10-8 from one of the judges. Yeah, so Deanna Bennett, it's kind of like a late career resurgence for her. Obviously came into Bellator with a very tough debut against Liz Carmouche, and I thought she looked very improved in her striking in that fight, despite ending up on the wrong end of a rear naked choke in the third round. But after that, goes out there and dominates Alejandra Lara to rebound, and then does the same thing to Justine Kish for the most part, just leaning on that wrestling background, but still trying out, not trying out, but comfortably competing on the feet with who people would have assumed would be the better striker going into it. And I guess that argument could still be there, but Deanna Bennett, yeah, proven that she's not done just yet. So we'll see what this means for Justine Kish. Bummer for her, who, just came into Bellator. So don't think we'll see the end of her just yet, of course, but not how she wanted to make her debut in the new promotion. So that is fun. Ghosto going back to the other fights says, can't argue with the decision, and Balbita's response was weird. You fight for the judges, so they score it for you. Is that what she said? That's I didn't see that. Or are you? I don't know. That seems like an odd. Sounds weird to me. Maybe I'm not comprehending properly, but Rain says didn't watch Bellator. Yep. I mean, they were going head to head, and I don't know. Yeah, it's just I wish they wouldn't go head to head. I really do. But they're gonna do what they're gonna do. James says not gonna listen to Big John ramble about UFC 1 while fights are going on. I expected one of those comments at least. Rue says I didn't even know Bellator was back. Well, there now you know. As they have an event this weekend too, which is in Ireland. I believe we'll talk about that soon enough. Jimmy says, but ghost judges are not smart. That is a fair point. So I don't know if that was a Balbita quote from Ghost or if Ghost was saying that, but yeah. Judges are their own breed these days. My goodness. But even though, just speaking of the judging in all of these fights, the Balbita versus DePaula was not a robbery. Like I said, obviously you guys a little bit split on the scoring, maybe more heavily in favor of DePaula, which is fine. I'm fine with that. Don't have any arguments. Yeah. So I don't think the judging was too terrible this week. Sko says, Jimmy, you fight to convince the judges. She said she fought for people. Oh, yes. Okay. I did see that. That's a good point then. Yeah. The fans do not decide the fight ultimately. So that is fair. He says, yeah, and the fans, right. So that was the one fight on Bellator 274. Yeah, seemed like a decent show. Didn't see the entire thing. Neiman Gracie and Storley in the main event threw like 800 strikes or something insane. Like, my goodness, I got to go and rewatch that one or watch it for the first time. But that sounds absolutely insane. I think I saw the number 800. That seems very high, but especially for a Gracie, obviously Neiman, probably the most well-rounded Gracie of all time at this point. I don't really think there's much argument about that, but that's wild to have heard. So anyway, as we move on now to the news portion of the show, no mailbag just yet. Maybe we can open that up at some point. But again, this show is just going to be kind of open forum the whole way through. If you haven't been able to tell as of yet, just ask your questions whenever you want. Interrupt me. I don't care. We're going with the flow here. It's the whole mania aspect of it, right? Just madness, chaos. But yeah. As Jimmy asks, what is up with Bellator's matchmaking? Great question. So this is not on the lineup for the news right now, but since you asked, I think it can fit in perfectly. As we saw last week, I believe it was last week, Kat Zingano was fighting Pam Sorensen next, which is fine. That fight is totally fair, and Kat probably should get through somebody like Pam before fighting Cyborg after only beating Olivia Parker and Gabby Holloway. It makes sense to get a win over somebody like Pam to get a title shot, but we all expected Kat getting the title shot, like practically the only opponent left or at present readily available, wants to fight Cyborg, so do that fight, you would think. Apparently not. According to Coker, what he said that Kat's management wants one more win or something. I don't know. But yeah, Bellator's matchmaking, the last 6 months, that we've been seeing it and talking about it, maybe the whole last year, actually. A lot of weirdness when it comes to the women, no doubt about that. And sometimes with the men, but I feel like it's a lot worse, as you guys know, some of their matchmaking with the women. So I don't know. James says, Drake, question for you. Did you see Andrew Whitman say that it's okay that Victor Cost lets Angela Lee foul people since she is a star and refs need to favor stars? I'm assuming, yeah, a little bit all over the place here. Olivier Cost, the referee, and Andrew Whitelaw, I'm assuming, as Rain says, OMG, I saw that on a CMP fight. Lots of respect. Lost a lot of respect. So I'm not going to comment personally on Andy Whitelaw. Shout out to him. But that is definitely a very interesting take. Saying it's okay to let Angela Lee foul people since she is a star and refs need a favorite stars. That's a very disgraceful take. I mean, obviously, Whitelaw is nothing wrong with him. I don't, but I very strongly disagree with that. That should not, no, that makes no sense whatsoever. I think I'll leave it at that. Yeah, that's very odd. Don't agree with that. That's no. We'll leave it there. All right, Ghost has a timestamp. So that's the definition of corruption. If I'm just going to add a little bit more, you don't want that. No. And we know that one championship has enough problems with questionable things. So that's interesting. That is very interesting. Making me think a little bit more with that one. Anyway, as for the news, feel free to keep questions coming, though. Of course, you guys, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, as I can see the numbers here, and Twitter, of course. If you're on Twitter, you're going to have to head over to one of those options to get your comments in. Appreciate all the interaction. Real quick, as I see, Fan of Punch Breakdown mentions. So you guys know Fan of Punch as of right now. Maybe we can figure some way for that to be done, but with kind of the potential copyright issues on places with more exposure as we are now, don't know if it's the best to gamble with that idea. And of course, you get permissions and all that kind of thing, but maybe some kind of slideshow type breakdown could be incorporated in the future, but at the moment have yet to really work on that with our man Ghost over here. So yes, I know we'll miss the Fan of Punch temporarily as we can, but it's tricky. It is very tricky sometimes, even though we did make it work in the past. So anyway, as for the news, bantamweight fight going down. Mayra Bueno Silva versus Yananwu, UFC Vegas 51 on April 16th. So poor Wu just has not been able to get a fight recently. She was supposed to take on, I don't even remember who it was, but had a fight, lost a fight, and she was supposed to fight Betch a while back too, and then it ended up going to Carol Hosa. All these kind of things playing out for Wu, even though she did have the Jocelyn Edwards fight, the loss, and now taking on Mayra Bueno Silva. Which the most interesting thing about this news is that MBS is going up to bantamweight, former flyweight. So you'll remember her fights with Montana De La Rosa. That was the draw. And then her last fight against Manuel Fior. Interesting decision. I think that flyweight seemed pretty fine for Mayra. Not going to complain about any additions to the 135-pound weight class. And this matchmaking here seems like a fine one to start out with for her, I would assume, I believe, debut in the division. But maybe she'll get back to kind of the ways we were used to seeing her compete, because in the last fight it was kind of an odd performance from her, and Furo just kind of styled on her a little bit. And I know people did have complaints about that performance from Manuel as well, but so this is an intriguing one. Obviously, Yananwu has been working with Timo Yama in California, even though I believe she's in Vegas right now, and actually with Mung Bo. So Mung Bo is in the States at the moment. If you follow her on Instagram, you can see all of her adventures. Both of them together, hanging out a lot. So not too bad of a training partner for either of them. But yeah, so Vegas 51, April 16th. Not mad at it. Should be interesting. Sammy is here. Good afternoon, Drake. Long time since I've been here. Good to see you, my friend. Good to see you as well, Sammy. Thanks so much for tuning in. It has been a while. It has indeed. As Ghosts gives his update saying, we will see. Been busy with other things. Haven't we both? Haven't we all? And yes, he says, plus we don't want to get Drake in trouble. Definitely not. Gotta be more careful about some things, just be professional as best as we can. Not to say we weren't before, but you can get away with it sometimes. Scott says, is Priscilla Cashwer fighting for a job this weekend? Good question. I would have to imagine so, and we will talk more about that fight, Scott. But yeah, they gave her another shot after the eye gouge gate with Jillian Robertson. So I would think if she can't pull off the win this weekend, that would presumably be a wrap. But we will find out. So Jimmy asking, what does Silva do well and what does Yananwu do well? What should we watch for here? Well, Jimmy, that's a question that will be saved for the preview, my friend, because this is the news portion. I know you want your answers, but that is exactly why we try to break it up a little bit. So I'm going to keep you waiting on that one till April. But Mayra Bueno Silva typically has been, I feel, fairly well-rounded, but dangerous on the ground, as we've seen with her grappling game, and packs a decent punch, but I'll just give you that much for now. And surely Ghost can chime in if he wants. I know, I'm sure you're curious. Rain says, Ghost and Drake, how about dropping them in the Twitter mailbag like how it started? That could be... That's an idea. I'd have to think about that a little bit more, Rain. Thank you for suggestions, but we'll see. We will see. Work in progress. Yes, the ultimate women's combo, Jimmy says. Appreciate you. And he says he doesn't know too much about these two. All right. So that's why we take the time to wait for the preview and further digest, because don't want to talk about it too much because we don't know if it'll even happen, right? It's always... We're in the early stage where the announcement happens. And as we know with Wu, at least somewhat recently, getting attacked by cancellations, the cancellation bug, if you will. So yeah, don't want to put too much thought into something until we're right there. That's kind of how I feel about it generally. Just the overall thought of the fight being made is kind of what the news cycle is for. And speaking of that, we have one today. And Scott asked about Priscilla Cashwer being in danger of losing her job. Well, I mean, Sam Hughes is getting another shot because as of today, it was announced that she will be taking on Estela Nunes on that same card. Actually, I didn't realize that till just reading the ticker. But yeah, a little bit of a surprise. Sam Page continues fourth, still seeking that first UFC win, right? And against Estela Nunes, who will be doing the same thing. Her last fight, her debut, came against Ariane Carnelossi. Well, it got submitted in the third round, if I'm remembering correctly. I know that she did lose. I'm just trying to remember exactly what the finish was, but I'm surprised to see Sam still get another shot. No offense to her. Pacific Northwest representing. Gotta love it. But yeah, I did not expect to see that this morning. So this fight is not loser leaves town for either, because Nunes, again, just 0-1 so far. But I guess depending on how she could lose, who knows? Don't like to speculate about the jobs too much, but it should be a fun fight, I think. They both have a lot to prove after some recent happenings. And speaking of one championship, Estelle Nunes, former one championship roster. So yeah, I don't know. Didn't see that coming. Scott says Estela Nunes has maybe the most fun style of fighting to watch. Hope she can get a win. I mean, if I was to do an early prediction here, an early lean, Scott, I do think that we will see Estela getting the win in this one. I don't know. Sam Hughes, as very tough as she is, I think we've seen that she is not quite UFC caliber. I mean, her wrestling is solid, but not to a point where it's obviously able to give people too many issues. And what the Luana Pinheiro fight was the one that she just had and lost in. So I think somebody like Nunes can probably replicate something similar to that, put the pressure on her, get in her face, because she doesn't do too well with pressure. So, yeah, I favor Nunes early on here in this one, but I'd love to see a win for Washington State. I'll tell you that much. Just if we're gonna pick territories, which I generally really don't. I honestly don't care about that, but it's cool to see fighters from the area at any time. So, bum, bum, bum. James says Sam Hughes is the female Sam Alvey, just brings it even with a boring style. I guess that's fair to say. Um, yeah, I not the same level of we're not at that level yet of the streak, but yeah. Jimmy says, well, Drake, you thought Demopoulos wasn't UFC caliber. Yes, that is true. Good for calling me out. I guess training with Whaley a couple weeks helped. Well, I think we can still question whether or not she is UFC caliber, but that is fair, a fair call out. I always appreciate being righted. So thank you for that, Jimmy. But I mean, yeah, I doubt that it hurts training with Whaley, and I'm very eager to actually ask her about that because I've noticed that not a lot of people seem to know she did train with Whaley, and I believe, probably worked on some of her techniques that she has shown off so far. And Demopoulos is pretty good at finding openings on the ground, but at the same time, Silvana really kind of gave her that one. But again, still props to Demopoulos. Interested to see what is next for her. Maybe they could do, I don't know, DePaula versus Venopolis. Combining both of her names there. Demopoulos versus DePaula. Wouldn't be mad at that one. I think that makes some sense. Both coming off wins. Why not? Why not? But yeah, training with Whaley never hurts at all. So that fight is happening. Hughes versus Nunes. Estela Nunes, for those who don't know. All right. So that leads us to the preview portion of the show. And I haven't even said yet, but I probably should have said off the top. Sorry, guys, getting back in the swing of things. But if you haven't yet, please like, share, and subscribe to the video and the channel. Really helps out a lot as we, try to provide you all the best content you could ever ask for here at MMA Mania. It really supports, good for support. Hit that notification bell, all that kind of thing, so you never miss anything we got going on. Appreciate it greatly. As Rue says, Dan Tom, shout out to him, keeps telling Izzy to enjoy his wins and stop bringing it to the haters. What does Dan mean by that? Doesn't Izzy enjoy his wins? Yeah, I certainly think he does. But yeah, I don't know. I think I would need more context for that, Rue. Enjoys when to stop bringing it to the haters. Yeah, I'll need more context for that one. Yeah, he definitely likes to have fun with things, that's for sure. As Jimmy says, Ramona Pascual. So yes, let's talk about her for. Well, actually, we will talk about that after Bellator 275. Get that out of the way because I know you guys are gonna have plenty of things to say. Okay, Jen, understood. Understood. I'm so flying solo here, so don't worry. Bellator 275 preview, starting things off in the flyweight division as Danny McCormack, formerly Danny Nealon, takes on Stephanie Page. And it threw me off. I didn't realize that she obviously must have gotten married and changed her name. But the 5-0 Irish woman, Danny McCormack, is back and taking on Stephanie Page here in a home game. As we can see, 5-0 versus 5-3. Ireland versus France. Little bit of, you want to talk about one of those kind of interesting matchmaking fights, even though Danny, it's so hard not to call her Nealon, but McCormack, she is still young in her career with just 5 fights, 5-0, looked solid in all of them. How many in Bellator now? 1, 2, 3, all but 1. So the Delista fight was not. But As for Stephanie Page, who's coming off that loss to Irina Alekseeva in the Bellator Russia show, Alekseeva also a fantastic prospect. And before that, Flori Hani, split decision loss. So this should be McCormack's fight to lose. She is just the better fighter, plain and simply, from what we've seen, and particularly her ground game has, at least in her last fight, really shined through against was that Karush. Really heavy on top, very active. Ended up getting the finish in that one. Just imposed her will, and I could see her doing the same thing here against Stephanie Page. So I don't think there's too much to dissect about this one. Yes, anything can always happen, but at this level, in particular with Bellator, they typically make for certain fights for a reason, which is to build up kind of prospects that they see with some potential or marketability, perhaps. And in this case, woman out of Ireland who is 5-0, fighting at home. I think they want her to win, probably. So, not to say that Stephanie Page can't pull this off, but I just think McCormack a little bit too well-rounded and just most importantly, very strong on top. And I think that she will get it there. Get her against the cage, maybe take down from there. Work her way to maybe another ground and pound finish. We will see. But that is the pick I'm going with. Don't know if I'll do official predictions anymore, you guys. Unless you want me to. It's whatever. But if I had to, I guess McCormack by round two TKO, ground and pound. Even though Stephanie Page is fairly durable, I'll take the gamble on it. Even though I just said I wouldn't. Whatever. As Rue goes back to the other question, saying Dan Tom said that after he beat Whitaker the first time, I quote, "It's wrong for Izzy to say I don't have any knockout power," while Buffer was announcing his victory. Dan Tom said, "Just enjoy your win and don't focus on the haters." But isn't that Izzy's way of expressing himself? I think so. Yeah, I think that could be misinterpretation. Maybe a combination of both, because he's very self-aware, is Adesanya. And I guess just aware in general of what people say about him. Just that kind of thing. Very in tune, you could say. But I don't know. I think that's a little bit of both in that case, Rue. So as Rain says, why are people mad at Izzy's win? He's awesome with great striking. Plus, he's an anime nerd like most of us in the chat. I think that they thought people love Robert Whitaker, and it was definitely a competitive fight. So I don't know. It's an odd one because I had Izzy winning. I thought it was closer, but it was a close but clear, in my opinion. You know what I mean? I think that there are fights that can be that way, but again, people love Robert Whitaker. They want to see that guy be the champion again. So, all right. As Ghost says, no need for predictions, and Rue agrees. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Gonna get the gamblers mad at me, which is fine. I don't need to tell you what to do with your money anyway. So, good fun. As we move on to now the co-main event of this card at featherweight, Leah Mccourt taking on Sinead Cavanaugh. And as you will, of course, remember, Leah Mccourt, a Fanta Punch Breakdown recipient. Episode, I want to say 8 or 7. Throwback. Shout out to her. Go check it out if you haven't. Why not? Taking on Sinead Cavanaugh, recent title challenger to Chris Cyborg. This fight is fairly cut and dry, I think, in terms of you want to talk about what each do well. A pretty striker versus grappler matchup at its core. Sinead Cavanaugh, as most people have been able to should be able to get the better of Leah Mccourt on the feet, despite some things that she does well. And who knows, maybe she's made some drastic improvements since the Jessica Borga win, especially since the Janae Harding win, where she was definitely losing that one until catching the up kick and then finding a triangle. Pretty impressive comeback by her, but was not doing too hot in that one. And Cavanaugh, decent grappling defense, but I think Mccourt is good enough to be able to get her down at some point if she doesn't get knocked out in that process, which I think she should be fine being able to avoid that as well. But the interesting thing in the grand scheme of this fight is, you guys, I mentioned Zingano versus Pam earlier because you know damn well this is the fight. Leah Mccourt wins this fight, it's title shot time, which is, depending on how she looks in this fight, still could probably be too soon, just because Cyborg is just such a monster. But co-main event now, she beats the last title challenger, especially if she can finish her. She is going to get the fight with Cyborg before Kat does, because Kat's busy now. At least I would imagine that's how they would try and line it up. And Cyborg wants to be active as she can be. So I think that is what could happen if she wins. And I know that we were saying no predictions, but I think that Leah Mccourt can probably pull this off again if she just leans on that bread and butter, which she generally does, which is her takedowns and wrestling game. Get Sinead against the fence, get her to the mat, work from there, submission or ground and pound. I'm sure she will incorporate the ground and pound and try to work for the submission, whatever opening is there. Leah has been pretty decent at, looking for them. I haven't seen too much lately, just the Janae one when she was, again, losing that fight. So that was a good thing to see. But then against Jessica Borga, who she couldn't finish, yes, a solid win. Yes, it was Jessica Borga. An odd matchmaking fight again. This one is much more logical, but the advantages are pretty clear here. Sinead, solid boxer, should be able to keep Leah at the end of the jab. At least that's what she should try and do as she tries to shoot in for takedowns and put her on her ass, beat her up from there. But sometimes the opposite can happen. Who knows? Maybe Leah Mccourt will go out there and knock out Sinead Cavanaugh with a head kick, because we know that she does incorporate those kicks, as Ghost Phantom points out. Maybe not to the head necessarily, but hey, crazier things have happened. So let's see what you guys have got to say about this, huh? As real quick, Scott mentions IMO, is he easily won 4 of the 5 rounds and maybe all 5? I think that's possible too. I think that is certainly possible. Cintra says, after seeing what Ghost has to say, I'm also on no prediction side. Scott says, still waiting for robbery review from AK Leon. Mccourt versus Furo. The Beast won that fight, and it was a weight class up for Menno, and I think Mccourt missed weight for that fight. Yeah, that one was all over the place, and Menno definitely did a lot more, I think, and was better in that one. I mean, Mccourt essentially won from just being on top of her, from what I remember. And obviously different sizes, weight classes. James has also want no prediction due to logic. Ghost gave a couple weeks ago and being present. Leah Mccourt has some deceptive things with her striking while striking, says Ghost. Yes, that is true. And Alvin says, I also do not like the predictions. We should appreciate and talk about what each fighters do well. These fighters train. You guys, I just love the kindness, the appreciation here, even though some of you might not be caring too much about that. But Alvin, the king of positivity, it's wonderful. As Go says, why do people complain about closed decisions in the first place? I don't know. When something like that, even though I don't know if Whitaker and Adesanya would fall into that category, something like that is more of a passion-driven thing, right? You want to see a certain guy win, even though it's close, and then you call it a robbery because your guy didn't win, perhaps. as Alvin is the GOAT, as Jimmy says, no doubt about that. But yeah. Bellator 275. That is your co-main event of that evening. Leah Mccourt versus Sinead Cavanaugh. An important one at featherweight, at least for Leah. Sinead not getting a title shot anytime soon there, no matter how good she looks. Just got knocked out by Chris Cyborg. But happy to see her back so early. I won't say that much. So, all right, you guys. I'll try and wrap up in the next 15 minutes here, but that's okay. I think we're making great time. UFC Vegas 49 is also this weekend, and we get ready to preview it. And starting off with the fight that I'm sure you all are most excited for, as everybody's favorite Ramona Pascual has finally made it to the UFC, where she has been longing to be, and taking on Josiane Nunes, filling in for Jennifer Gonzalez. But before, there was somebody else before that. Nunes just getting a bunch of different opponents switched up on her, and it lands on Ramona. And they will be fighting at featherweight due to that short notice. Obviously, Nunes typically fights at bantamweight. Ramona has fought at bantamweight before. Her last fight was at featherweight, though, or 150 catchweight, right? Because she also had an opponent change up. So Ramona just going through the cycle of change ups here a little bit, whether in UFC fights or fights before that. And Ghost pointed out to me earlier, he was very perplexed by the odds on this fight. So I'm curious to see what you guys think about it, as well, as he highlighted the very good sized favorite that Josiane Nunes is at a minus 325 to Ramona's plus 250, which is interesting for multiple reasons. You know, how both fighters fight, what their skill sets are, but also the fact that, like, this is up a weight where it's more beneficial to Ramona. I think, yes, it helps Nunes not to cut weight, but my goodness, she is, you know, a very tiny in frame, I suppose, or at least her lengths is Nunes, who's obviously just 5'2" to Ramona's 5'7", but wildly enough, the reach here is actually an inch in Nunes's favor, and Ramona does not have the longest arms, but I wouldn't have expected that either. So this is gonna look very interesting, at least from that perspective. But yeah, welcome to the UFC, Ramona. Great to have you. We knew it was going to come eventually, just did not know when. Got that Invicta win, that fantastic, flawless performance against Shamir Peshua in her Invicta debut a month and 5 days ago, as it says, right to a T there from Tapology here. So yeah, Josiane Nunes, kind of like a Andrade light a little bit, at least if we're going to go off that last performance where she did knock out Bea Malecki with the overhand left there. More specifics, I'll love to see it. And is on a good winning streak. Only one loss. I think it was in her third fight or something. Been very heavily competing on the Brazilian regional scene throughout her career. In the UFC now, obviously packs a punch, but technique needs some work there. Whereas Ramona showed a much more complete, more compact performance in her last fight to get that finish against Shamir. So yeah, it's quite. I think it should be fun while it lasts, and just good to see Ramona here, like I said. But those odds, not sure about them. As Jimmy says, can you ask Ramona what she thinks of Whaley as a fighter? She still wants to train with her, like she said on Nick Atkins' interview in 2020. Yes, I can definitely get around to that at some point, and I'm sure she would be open to it now that Whaley's not in America right now, but Ramona is in America, training out of Syndicate in Las Vegas, where she lives now. As Jimmy says, what the fuck are these odds? And James says, seriously, these odds are dumb. Jen says, I cannot believe this nonsensical ridiculousness. Sintra says, I saw Ramona's breakdown in Nunes' last fight. Ramona has more tools and more technical. F the odds. Rue says these odds are dumb. It makes me angry. And goes, as I predicted, you guys know that odds don't affect outcomes of these fights. It's just what people think. And in this case, and in almost any case like this, it just shows literally that the odds makers are unfamiliar with Ramona. And it's not something to be mad about. It's actually probably a good thing if you think about it, because then you make more money if you are a gambler and you bet on the person who is in on the wrong line, which in this case, I think it's fair to say Ramona. Like, if she's not going to be favorite, she'll probably be a little bit closer. And the funny thing is, too, as recency bias always plays a factor, Ramona only was on the feet in her last fight, to outstrike and finish Peshua, but she's very talented everywhere. I feel like we don't see her mostly take her fights to the ground, but before that, she did, and we've seen that she's capable of really just mixing it up well. And in this fight, with the aggression that Nunes will present to her, I doubt she'll be afraid. She'll kind of come at, like I said, an Andrade light, obviously not as good as Andrade, but I see the similarities, not just physically, but in the way that they both fight, the power they have, that kind of thing. The aggression could very well end up costing Nunes here in this one, as she comes in a little bit recklessly, ends up getting herself probably countered a couple times, but I could see her getting taken down as well and finished in that respect. So I think this fight will ultimately end up on the ground, with Ramona in some good positions in that area, if I was to predict how it might play out without giving a specific prediction of who will win, as we're getting picky about that now. But Jin says, are we casuals rooting for Ramona since she's unknown? No, that I think makes you the opposite, Jin. Don't worry about that. As Ghost recommends to just YouTube Josiane Nunes fights, they are not good. She follows people. Like I said, that aggression, and doesn't know how to step laterally, says Ghost. All right, there's your Ghost analysis for what I believe that should be the first fight, the first women's fight of the night on the lineup. I've seen it kind of, obviously with the changes all over the place. It might be the second. I'm not totally sure. First or second. I just know that the last fight we'll talk about is like right before the co-main event, which is pretty interesting. But we move on to Ginyu Fry versus Hannah Goldie at strawweight, 115 pounds. So Ginyu Fry, the former Invicta Atomweight champion, looks to make it 3 in a row in the UFC. Crazy. Didn't think we would kind of be talking about that after how things started against Kay Hansen and Loma. Whereas Hannah Goldie looks to get back on a streak of her own after defeating Emily Whitmire by submission armbar. Just not the highest of fight IQs from Whitmire, unfortunately, in her last couple of fights, which ended up removing her from the UFC. But here we are now. Ginyu Fry, as I said, turning back the clock a little bit, has that win over Gloria Paula, who we just saw this past weekend, by utilizing her grappling, was getting outstruck fairly clearly, I suppose. It wasn't like a wash. There wasn't a lot of, I think Jin had about 11 minutes, a lot of time controlling GDP in that one with her wrestling. So leaning on that a bit. And then against Yoder, a little bit more of a mixed performance. But Jin has looked better since those first 2 losses in the UFC, of course. Still a pretty small strawweight. Jacked, as always, but not the biggest. And Hannah Goldie's not a big strawweight either, so I don't think that should matter too much. And as you can see, the height is in favor of Goldie by just an inch. And then the reach, 65 for Jin to 61. So they're fairly close in those metrics. And it's just been very odd careers kind of for both in the UFC so far. Goldie getting in from the Contender Series over the Callie Robbins win, which don't know necessarily if that should have done it. We know how Contender Series works these days. Miranda Granger lost. Diana Balbita, who also just fought this past weekend, almost knocked her out in the first round. Been a little bit inactive around this whole stretch, but now against Jin, who I think in Jin's case will try to kind of impose a bit more of a similar game plan to when she fought Gloria. Not that Goldie will outstrike her necessarily, but if they do kind of strike against each other, I think this could be a little bit more of a slower paced one. Jin has never been too much of an aggressive or high volume striker. So, and in Goldie's case, I think she's better on the ground, but at the same time, I don't think it should be too much of a problem for Ginyu Fry. We will see. As Ghost says, I'm tuning out for this one. As James says, I don't understand what Ghost has against Fry. She's a decent fighter, right? I mean, Steve said she was good. Don't want to hear from Ghost. Is she good? Don't want to hear from Ghost. Yes, he is not a fan. He definitely isn't. So, yeah. Sintra says, what does Fry actually do well? Ghost, your honest opinion, and Drake, your opinion. You're always honest. Yes, I do my absolute best at being as honest as I can. Well, I mean, it's interesting with Jin because there was a time where I probably would have said her striking was her best, the best part of her game. But honestly, it's like she's one of those fighters who, and this isn't me to be, disrespectful like we were saying there or anything, but it is kind of hard to say what exactly the best thing she does is. And it's kind of that old, theory of being a fighter who can do a lot of things well, but isn't great at one thing. And I'm not sure I want to say she falls into that category, but at least recently, despite being back on a winning streak here, she might in the UFC. Beforehand, like I said, in Invicta, in her kind of prime at atomweight, I would maybe say her striking was, and of course, we'll all remember, at least those who followed Jin's career will remember that head kick she had in like her first or second fight. And then I believe it was the head kick, or was it the right straight that put her opponent away against the cage, like a total highlight reel. But we haven't really seen too much of that since then. So it's been very odd with Jin. It really has. As Ghost says, his actual opinion, she has the basics down, but that's it. No deception or trickery, which is highly valued. I mean, he sums that up pretty well, honestly. Like there's nothing flashy about Jin's style. Nothing super complex, essentially. As Ghost says, those fighters don't go very far, but will beat lower opposition. I mean, hey, she managed to become champion, like I said. So, and she's not the same fighter necessarily that she was at atomweight, but done enough to continue winning and get on a winning streak, and could be 3-0 in the UFC, at least in her last 3, with a win here against Hannah Goldie. We'll see how that shakes out. But that's why we watch, right? That is why we watch. So, excuse me. All right. So we move on to the next and last fight on the docket here. As Ghost says, the whole point of fighting is to trick people, which is a fair point. And it's kind of the entire point of every sport, right? Like you look at football, American football, for example, all the plays, every single thing is about making the other team think you are going to do something that you won't, and then you trick them, right? You get past them. So it's like human chess, right, Ghost? I went there. Oh, man. So fair, very fair points. As we move on, like I said, to the last fight at flyweight, as Jion Kim takes on Priscilla Casuara in what I believe is the fight before the co-main event, which is just interesting. just interesting lineups the UFC is doing these days, right? Obviously, UFC 272 next week, which, my goodness, I'm going to have a field day with that one, you guys. Let me warn you right now. I have some bitching to do. But as for this one, Cashwer versus Kim, I think I don't know how much more I have to say about it aside from what I said about it when it was announced. But very interesting that Priscilla Cashwer is getting another shot in the UFC after, trying to cheat her way out of a loss to Jillian Robertson in that last fight. And I mean, if Kim loses, that could be it for her as well, as just has not been able to put it together. The Molly McCann loss, Grasso before that. I mean, 1-3 in her last 4. Just been a very odd UFC run for Jion Kim, despite training a syndicate, all that now, and with their teammate Ramona. So they're actually just kind of dawning on me that they're fighting on the same card together for Ramona's debut. That's kind of cool in that regard. But yeah, Zombie Girl. I mean, I enjoy the story, the backstory of her career and everything, but I think we know what we get with her definitely at this point, which is a wild brawler. She just throws wild punches, and when she lands, she can do some damage and put you away. We've seen that, but her takedown defense is just not a thing. It's non-existent. I think I said it last time, if there were stats in the UFC game for her takedown defense, it would be like a -10, and they don't even go that low. They don't go very low at all. But it's the opposite of there, which is not there. So for Kim, it would be very wise for her to try and take this fight to the ground, because she probably very easily could do it despite not being a great wrestler herself. Much more known for her striking and has plenty of striking accolades outside of MMA to her name, but hasn't quite been able to put them together in the MMA space. So this is just kind of an odd one that could be all over the place. It feels like one of those fights where, I don't know. It's odd. It's very odd. But I think that the odds here, if you want to talk about the odds again, they're right. I think these are fair to make, or fairly adjusted, whatever you want to say. Slight favorite, -190 for Kim to the +160 underdog of Casuara. I mean, Casuara just needs to survive and hope that Kim maybe tires a bit and she can finish her on the feet with her boxing, because Cashwer, despite all that, she actually has decent enough cardio. And I mean, we've seen that practically in both of those last 2 wins where she knocked out Gina Mazzani and Shanna Dobson, who did just fine against her early on, and then she finished them in the end. So, and I could see it happening. I could honestly see Kim choking away a win that should definitely be hers in theory, just because it's so clear how to beat Priscilla Cashwer, I think, at this point. But easier said than done, I guess, in some cases. So Ghost says, yes, Drake, run, dive 5 times and play a good play an action bootleg. Oh, he's talking about chess. I was like, what is this exactly? As Rue says, this is weird. Why is eye gouging girl back? Don't know. Jimmy says, is Kim good enough to keep Priscilla off her? She did an okay job with Meatball, right? Okay job, right? Like, not great, because Meatball still controlled pretty much every avenue of that fight, backed up against the cage, poured it on her. Jion Kim's career has just been odd. It's just been so odd. She has like this potential, at least in theory, because of what she's accomplished, again, her backgrounds, to show you some really great striking, you would think, but I don't know. It just hasn't come together. Maybe with her back against the wall in this one, it will. More time at Syndicate, all that kind of thing. Can't be terrible. I just hope that she and the team has recognized it for her sake. As Rue says, our story's more important than technique. Ghost favors technique and stuff. I don't understand until she shows them, while Drake favors the stories, which is cool. So we get to know fighters. Yeah, I mean, you need that good blend, right? Kim actually has a jab. Slow, but it was catching meatball. Plus, I love that style of being slower than molasses and still being able to land her strikes due to a good position. That is true. That's true. There is that aspect of it. But Go says, Drake, a dive is a run play, gap in football, and a play action bootleg is a fake run to a flood concept. A build, obviously. Yes, sorry, I'm all over the place. Getting all these sports intertwined. You are very right. Yeah, 5 times the dive, then the play action fake there. Get them to think you're going to keep on running, and then you throw it down the field, right? Yes. Wow, I'm ashamed that that went over my head there, and I thought that was chess. You would think I've been watching football for most of my life, right? Much longer, 10 times is longer than MMA, actually. So, yes, he knows football as well. I mean, that is a very strategic sport. Both Jimmy and James are perplexed by it, as is Jen. But all right, you guys, that is UFC Vegas 46, along with Bellator 275, of course. So yeah, the very first episode of WMMA Mania, so cleverly titled in the books. And I'm ashamed that Sammy did not tell me earlier. I guess he shouldn't have. Had no reason to, but he suggested WMMA Mania as the title, which is like, oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So bummed out that I missed that one. But oh well, it's all right. We're here anyways. Hope you guys enjoyed. It was a fun old time. Good to be back. And now I'm having issues here with whatever is going on. Let's play some of the music again, just for the outro, huh? That's good fun. As we say goodbye, the final comments. Centro, how does Ghost know everything? Ghost just loves strategy. Rue says, so sad that there is no Phantom Punch. We'll see what we can do. No promises, like I said. But yeah. Rain says, WMania, that's a good one. I know. I'm upset about it. I am upset about that. Scott says, are we able to give you a good review on iTunes, or can we do it anywhere for you? So not sure about the audio stuff just yet, but yeah, just YouTube at this exact moment, Scott. We'll probably try and figure out the audio only options at some point. But once that possibility is there, if it is there, yes, please do go ahead and do that. As Alvin says, great show. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for tuning in, everybody, whether you are on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, wherever it may be that you were checking us out here for the very first installment of the Reincarnated Show that talks about all the latest happenings involving the women of the sport. Very much appreciated. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget, follow us, like, share, and subscribe at DrakeRiggs _ at MMA Mania on all social platforms. Follow the website, check out the stories, good stuff there. And I guess it's time for the shameless plugs, right, you guys? Because it is Monday. It's a big Monday for me. We got the show back. I have my interview with Angela Lee dropping in about an hour and 20 minutes, so check that out. The current one championship atomweight champion takes on Stant Fairtex on March 26th at 1X. Spoke to her. She was actually my first interview I did for MMA Mania. Just been holding it off until the fight was a little bit closer. So that is releasing today. You can see that here on the channel, on the website, all that good stuff. And then at 3:30 p.m. Pacific time, Broaden Horizon episode 13 is dropping as well. So check that out. It is back, baby. You love to see it. On this episode, we got Kleber Koike, who competes this Wednesday, I think, in the States at Rise and Trigger second in the cage. February 23rd takes on Oka Sasaki. Great chatting with Kleber. And Shizuka Sugiyama, Japan's maybe greatest flyweight. It's between her and Rinda Kai. We're going to find out because they're in a tournament together. Deep Jewels 36 begins March 12th. She takes on Mikiko Shimizu. So yes, just a two-person lineup for Broaden Horizon, but still a good one nonetheless. Check that out. In a matter of hours, you guys, check out the Angela Lee one as well. fantastic stuff. Plenty of great content coming to you guys. And also spoke to Amanda Lemos recently. That is not dropping today, but it will be coming out before the fight, don't worry. As well as Karina Rodriguez, who defends her flyweight title at Invicta 46 next week, I think that is, or the week after. Either way, lots of stuff coming, you guys. Appreciate you all so much. Very exciting stuff. Thank you so much to all of you guys. Till next time. Rain, you're making me laugh. Okay, you guys, until next week, I will see you then. Take care.